The Annulus. Journey into the unknown. Through the vortex. Y. Sengyang. Copyright at 2020 Y. Sengyang. All rights reserved. The characters and events portrayed in this book are fictitious. Any similarity to real persons, living or dead, is coincidental and not intended by the author. No part of this book may be reproduced, or stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means, electronic, mechanical, photocopying, recording, or otherwise, without express written permission of the publisher. Chapter 10. All that glows is nuclear. The hustle of activity at the Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant was unlike that for a normal quiet day. Additional personnel had been deployed due to the strange sightings during the day. Duty personnel had noticed rapid flashes of blue light on the sky above the nuclear power plant and positioned surveillance cameras to keep watch on this. The radioactivity emission instruments recorded jumps in the readings every time there were flashes of blue light. Yet no leakages could be found on the plant and equipment, everything was found to be fully functional. As per standard protocol, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, state and federal authorities were duly notified. Within an hour of the disappearance of the light clouds from Sun Valley, flashes of light bursts began to appear over the nuclear plant and light clouds made their appearance in the twilight sky. Sunset passed, and as the light clouds hung over the darkening skies above the nuclear power plant, the general alert was raised by the plant manager on consultation with the governing board of the power plant and the state governor. Homeland Security and the White House were given the heads-up, and permission was granted for the governor to issue mobilization orders of the National Guard. Within a few hours of the first sighting, the National Guard had established an exclusion zone of 20 miles around the plant. At dawn of the next day, the activity at the site was at a heightened level. TV crews had got wind of the alert and were already in position in full force when dawn broke. The crowds of onlookers were building up, and a cordon had to be set up to keep the onlookers from venturing into the exclusion zone. The Pentagon deployed substantial military resources overnight and maintained a complete lockdown of the entire San Luis Obispo County, but with strict instructions from the Joint Chiefs not to engage. The Diablo plant had been undergoing gradual shutdown and progressive decommissioning process. But being a live nuclear facility, precautions had to be taken to prevent damaging the plant or releasing nuclear material into the open. Air Force jets and helicopters hovered and zoomed around the nuclear power plant, observing the light clouds as they slowly drifted over each building and equipment installation in the power plant as if they were searching for something. By 9 a.m., the U.S. Army had the first contingent of heavy armor and HIMARS multi-launch rocket weapon systems deployed around the perimeter of the plant. Air Force helicopters and fighter jets flew overhead to maintain a wary air patrol at a distance from the cluster of light clouds. The science team arrived at Diablo Canyon with General Wayne and set up shop in the power plant control room. Colonel Rick Owens rushed by chopper to Diablo Canyon, took command of the National Guard's units and deployed the 11th Regiment in strike formation at the vanguard ready for action. General Wayne entered the control room with a team of MPs and took over control of the situation. As site commander, he was ready to call for an immediate evacuation of the nuclear plant. General Wayne called General Stanton and the Defense Secretary Ian Smith at the White House for consultation. All the live feed was displayed and monitored in the White House Situation Room. General Stanton came online and asked General Wayne for a situation report. At the end of the brief update, General Stanton asked, "Mr. President, the light clouds are now over the spent nuclear fuel storage bay at Diablo Canyon plant. What are your orders?" President Walker looked at those assembled in the White House conference room. "Richard, Kevin, what are our options now?" Ian Smith took over the call from the president and replied, "General Wayne, we are also getting the video feed here. We will call you with the instructions in a few minutes." President Chris Walker turned and looked at the assembled task force in the White House conference room. "Do we evacuate, and after that, do we sit and just watch these things?" As he spoke, the live camera feed showed the light clouds gathering over the spent fuel storage complex. With a burst of blue light, each of the light clouds sprouted tentacles which spread and covered the entire roof of the storage complex. "General Wayne, here they come. They must be after the spent fuel canisters." The plant manager, who was monitoring the actions of the light cloud, clouds, did not wait any longer but decided in the interests of all concerned to call for a total plant shutdown and final evacuation of all the plant's remaining personnel. The hotline between the White House Situation Room and the control room came live. On the White House end, Defense Secretary Ian Smith and Homeland Secretary Richard Bowen spoke up, "Mr. President, we must act at once. Their actions will lead to nuclear fuel spillage into the general area and will create a major radioactive contamination incident. We must launch an attack to stop them." Ken on site with the team spoke on the conference call, "Mr. President, I advise caution. Our firepower at Sun Valley did not seem to harm these things or to stop them. There they did not create any damage except to absorb all the scrap steel and armored vehicles." Richard Bowen, "No, I do not disagree with Dr. Harding. These entities may at present be benign and have no intentions other than to gather mass. However, their actions will lead to collateral damage and the damage to the nuclear facility can be catastrophic for the whole San Luis Obispo County. The potential of radioactive leakages into the Pacific Ocean with the location of the plant on the shoreline is likely. Ian Smith, all the more reason, I say we stop them now before this can happen. We cannot have nuclear contamination of the county and the entire Californian Pacific coastline at risk." And what happened at Sun Valley? Or have everyone forgotten? Our tanks and APC weapon fire did nothing to these things. Professor Brown, "Mr. President, the science team does not advise military action. If the firing damages the facility, there could be secondary contamination from the waste fuel that will require a major cleanup job. Worst still, should the reactors get damaged, we will lose control of the plant when the cooling systems stop functioning. The cores will get exposed and go critical. The radiation fallout would render large parts of California as well as the Pacific Ocean coastline dead zones. We recommend that we try communicating with them to prevent the need for military action." President Walker asked, "How do we do that? Do we have some communication method to do this?" General Stanton, "Professor Brown, we had hailed them on all frequency wavebands, in voice, light signals using Morse code, and there have been no responses." Ken, "That is what we know of. We are still trying to figure out their mode of communications. They may have responded in a manner that we still have not recognized." President Walker announced, "Well, we cannot wait any longer. General Stanton, call the governor that I approve of declaring a nuclear alert over the entire county." He turned to the Homeland Security Richard Bronson, "Get FEMA to initiate immediate evacuation of the general population within the 20-mile exclusion zone. Get the National Guard, the local police and state police on it at once." He picked up the phone and asked his PA, "Susan, get me the California Governor Greg Tuttle at once." He then turned to the Ian Smith and Richard Bowen, "You have my permission, use sensible force and stop these damn things." President Walker then spoke on the live line to General Wayne on site, "General Wayne, you are authorized to use necessary force to keep those things from our spent nuclear fuel." General evacuation orders were given, and the siren sounded over the entire Diablo nuclear power plant and the surrounding area. The science team together with General Wayne left in their hums for the safety of the tactical command post set up by Colonel Rick Owen outside the 20-mile exclusion zone. The 1st and 2nd squadrons of the 11th took up positions at the perimeter of the nuclear plant, keeping the light clouds within their weapons firing ranges. Upon orders from General Stanton, General Wayne called Trellis Air Force Base and gave the orders to strike command. General Wayne speaking, "We have AGO on strikes on these things. No missiles or heavy ordnance are to be used. Only machine guns and light weapons are to be used. Do not fire at the nuclear reactor and the fuel silos. If we damage the containment vessel of the reactor or the fuel storage silos, we will be doing exactly what we want to avoid." The 140th Aviation Assault Helicopter Squadron under Lieutenant Colonel Rose operating AH-64E helicopters was already on alert at the Los Alamitos Air Force Base. On receiving their orders, loaded their 30mm cannons with proximity-fused explosive rounds and took off for Diablo Canyon Power Station. As the helicopters flew in with Air Force F-22s flying cover overhead, the light clouds remained oblivious of their approach. The first flight of AH-64Es targeted one of the light clouds that had positioned itself over the freshwater reservoirs above the plant. The AH-64ES fired their 30mm cannons with high explosive rounds, only to see these rounds fly right through the light cloud to explode on the hillside. The shrapnel from other exploding rounds peppered the light cloud. The light clouds began to group together and extend their tentacles towards the ground. Each cloud fluoresced with blue light, and a blue dome just as in Sun Valley appeared over the hillside over the electrical power transmission station. The next flight of AH-64ES fired their incendiary bullets at the light clouds. The exploding round seemed to have done no damage to the light clouds, except to have attracted their attention. As the first flight of AH-64ES came around for a second firing pass, the blue light dome flared up in a blaze of energy and enveloped them. These helicopter in hover formation ready to fire rockets at the light clouds could not get out of range of the energy spike, were engulfed and disappeared. General Wayne radioed the squadron leader of the AH-64s, Colonel Rose, "Status report please, we seem to have lost contact with Flight A." Lieutenant Colonel Rose, "General, flight that encountered an energy spike from this strange blue dome, and we have lost all visual and radio contact with Flight A." Colonel Owens from his deployed position reported, "The light clouds have again broken out of the dome and are headed the way of the nuclear reactors." General Stanton, Colonel Rose and Colonel Owens, "You are authorized to use any means at your disposal to stop them." And Ken, "The depleted uranium we use for shielding the defender unit." The blue energy of the light clouds did not seem able to penetrate the unit. It may be that the depleted uranium material can be effective in some form or manner. Ken, Colonel Owens, "Does the 11th Regiment have depleted uranium ammo?" Maybe that would be effective. Professor Brown, Ken and I had already guessed that the depleted uranium may be of more use than just shielding. Colonel Owen, "Has your troops prepared those shells with timer fuses loaded with the depleted uranium pellets?" Colonel Owens, "Yes, our army has prepared a limited number of shells with these uranium pellets distributed to the M1A2 when we refitted the 1st Squadron." General Stanton, Colonel Owens, "You have permission to engage these things. Use any means including the depleted uranium ammo." Colonel Rose, "Pull your choppers back." A deadly silence descended over the entire Diablo Canyon site. The fighter jets and choppers withdrew but maintained a holding pattern of 10 miles from the power station. The light clouds rolled out over the remainder of the Diablo nuclear power plant and towards the advance guard of the 11th Regiment positioned on the hills overlooking the power plant. Colonel Owens gave the instruction to all the APCs and M1A2s in the 1st and 2nd Squadrons under Captain Evans in the vanguard to load up on the depleted uranium rounds. Captain Evans, Colonel Owens, "All units loaded up with the depleted uranium and ready." Colonel Owens, "Fire at will." The M1A2 opened fire at the light clouds and the rounds exploded and sprayed their targets with the depleted uranium pellets. Hit by the uranium pellets, they lit up with flashes of blue light and could be seen visibly to pulse and shrink in size. The light clouds withdrew into the dome and disappeared. General Robert Wayne radioed Colonel Owen, "Okay, Colonel Owens, give me a visual of the dome and find out what happened to the missing choppers." All available sensors, tracking devices, and cameras were turned to focus on the dome, but no traces of the AH-64S could be seen. As dusk settled over the site, the dome fluoresced and lit up the night sky. General Stanton gave the instructions for a watch over all available cameras' views as well as on-site visual watch over the dome. Dawn of the new day broke. As the morning sun rose in the sky, all seemed quiet. A sudden wave of high-energy transmission ripped through the display screens and communication devices. Then all went dead and after a few minutes, they flickered and came back online. One of the operators picked up the phone and called General Wayne. "Sir, the dome is gone and there are no more light clouds or the dome." And there was a powerful burst of energy transmission that was picked up by our sensors and scanners. It blacked out everything for a few minutes. "General Wayne, give me the latest situation report from site. And get a recon flight up there and sweep the entire area. I want to know what is there and what is not." The air sweep of the whole area confirmed that there were no signs of the light cloud entities at all. Back at the White House, at the break of dawn, the Secretary of State picked up the phone and received urgent missed phone calls from his counterparts in Ukraine, where it was already late afternoon in the day. Then the call from the President of Ukraine reached his desk telephone. "Mr. Secretary, I need to speak with the President. We have most urgent and critical information we need to share with the United States of America." Secretary of State Jim Davis: "President Aristov, you can give me the news first. What is so urgent and critical that you have to talk to the President?" President Aristov: "Strange light clouds have appeared over Chernobyl. We have received this news from our quarantine security team at the abandoned nuclear site. Our Foreign Minister Larin has been tasked to send to your U.S. Defense Attaché at Kiev the latest observer reports from Chernobyl." Secretary Jim Davis: "What? Send me whatever information you have on this at once. What are these light cloud entities doing there in Chernobyl?" President Aristov: "We cannot get close to observe, but from what readings we are getting, the radiation levels in the area around the sarcophagus that we built around the collapsed reactors is spiking very dangerously." Secretary Jim Davis: "Hold on to the line, Mr. President. I will put you on hold while I have my PA patch you through to the President." Jim Davis: "Jenny, call the President for me now." Within a minute, Jim Davis was speaking with President Walker. "Mr. President, I have President Aristov of the Ukraine on the other line. He needs to talk to you now." President Chris Walker: "What is it about, do you know?" Jim Davis: "There are reports of light clouds appearing over Chernobyl according to the Ukraine authorities. Their Foreign Minister Larin will follow President Aristov's call with a direct call to you." President Walker: "Jim, what do we know about the situation there? Do we have the reports from our satellites?" Susan, President's PA: "Get the CIA Director Roland Weiss on the other line." When the line was put through: "Roland, do you know of the latest nuclear crisis?" "No, not North Korea." "Get our satellites over Chernobyl now." Jim Davis: "Seems that the light clouds are showing an unhealthy interest in the sarcophagus built over reactor number 4. Mr. President, Foreign Minister Larin is on one of the other lines for you." President Walker: "Okay, I will talk to him after Aristov." President Walker: "Foreign Minister Larin, President Aristov has informed me of the situation at Chernobyl. He says that you will give me a detailed briefing. So what are these reports I am hearing about the light clouds showing up over Chernobyl?" Foreign Minister Larin: "Mr. President, my staff is now sending to Secretary Davis our site reports from inside the exclusion zone which show the appearance of these light clouds 12 hours ago." President Walker: "Minister Larin, you are only informing the United States of America 12 hours after these things show up. We all know we do not want a repeat of 1986 Chernobyl incident when the world was told only after radiation was detected over large areas of Europe downwind of Chernobyl." Foreign Minister Larin: "Mr. President, the exclusion zone is not frequented after we shut down the entire nuclear reactor complex. I am sure your satellites will be over the site soon, but the situation is so serious that I have chosen to call you direct. We do not know what we are facing with, but another impending nuclear disaster is not improbable." At the point in time, the President's PA patched the call into the White House Situation Room. With the President's direction, the call was also patched through to the site team in Diablo Canyon site. When President Walker regained his seat inside the Situation Room: "Please continue, Minister Larin. What are the clouds doing over Chernobyl?" Minister Larin: "Our security guards who patrol the complex in shielded vehicles since the collapse of part of the roof of the turbine hall happened to spot these light clouds appearing over the sarcophagus built over the collapsed nuclear reactor 4. They hovered for about an hour and then disappeared and then reappeared 2 hours ago in greater numbers." President Walker: "Minister Larin, the United States of America has assembled the best scientific and technical brains to handle a similar situation that we have here in the U.S. Secretary Davis will speak with you now. Please fill him in with all the details." VP Kevin Rowan, who took the incoming call from the U.S. intelligence agencies, signaled to the President and walked up to whisper into his ear that U.S. satellites have confirmed the information on Chernobyl given by the Ukrainians. President Gorkov of Russia called in on the hotline to speak directly with President Walker. President Walker switched his call to President Gorkov of Russia. "Ukrainian President Aristov and his Foreign Minister Larin have been on the phone with us just now. and we know of the situation at Chernobyl. What is the Russian view of all of this? President Gorkov, I would first like your assurance, President Walker, that the United States of America has nothing to do with these sightings. President Walker, President Gorkov, I do not know what you are talking about. Of course, we are not involved. In fact, we have a similar incident here in the USA. I think we need to combine our best forces, both scientific and military, to handle this extremely dangerous situation at Chernobyl. President Gorkov, agreed. I will ask my defense minister to contact your defense secretary Ian Smith to make all the arrangements. President Walker, I will speak with President Aristov and Minister Larin and brief them of our agreement for a joint Ukrainian, Russian, American task force to go to Chernobyl. President Gorkov, in view of the existing situation between Ukraine and Russia, I must insist on the USA having the only decision-making voice on this joint task force, and Russia can only monitor the situation remotely. US and Ukrainian personnel will take the leading roles on the ground as the situation calls for. President Gorkov hesitated for a few moments and could be heard to be consulting his own staff listening in on the conversation. He then came back on the line. Agreed, but if any emergency situation occurs, Russia will insist on direct participation as necessary. President Walker, agreed, but any participation by Russian will need joint agreement from Ukraine and the USA. With this common understanding, preparations for mobilization of the science team to Chernobyl were set in motion.